You ever notice something really weird? When we were kids, the good guys were just good guys. From Superman to Captain America to even Optimus Prime, they smiled, they inspired people, they believed humanity was worth saving. And somewhere along the way, we all kind of looked at that guy and went, yeah, he's cool. Anyway, seriously though, somewhere along the line, we all collectively decided, you know who I really relate to? The emotionally unavailable billionaire who dresses up like a bat, or the immortal Canadian with anger issues and knives in his hands, the hitman who processed grief by murdering what feels like the population of a medium sized town, the chemistry teacher who looked at cancer and somehow arrived at meth empire. What happened? No, really, what happened? Because when did we stop wanting to be Superman and start wanting to be Batman, or Wolverine, or Deadpool, or the Punisher, or, let's be honest, that one character your buddy swears is just misunderstood when in reality he's committed about 17 felonies before coffee? And the weird part isn't that these characters exist. They have always existed. The weird part is we didn't just accept them. We fell in love with them. They became our favorite characters. They became our profile pictures or phone wallpapers, our personality traits. Somewhere along the way, emotionally damaged became a branding strategy. So today, I want to figure something out. Because I don't actually think this is an episode about Batman, or Wolverine, or John Wick. I think it's an episode about us, and why broken people sometimes feel more believable than perfect ones, and what that says about the world we've grown up in. Hey, and welcome to, or welcome back to, the Average Joe Nerdcast. I'm Nate, your resident Average Joe, professional rabbit hole explorer, and a man who's beginning to think that about 90% of our favorite fictional characters could have avoided their entire stories with one really good therapist. Seriously, Batman, therapy. The Punisher, therapy. John Wick, listen, buddy, I'm not saying don't be upset. I'm just saying maybe don't solve it with 457 headshots. Kratos, listen, therapy existed in Greece too. Probably. You know what? I really don't know. I did not Google that part. And if you're new around here, welcome. Every Monday and Thursday, we grab a question that's been rattling around in my brain, throw it under a microscope, and see where the rabbit hole takes us. Sometimes it's nostalgia, sometimes it's movies, sometimes it's video games, and sometimes I accidentally start researching something at 10 o'clock at night, and suddenly it's 1 in the morning, and my search history looks like I worked for the FBI. Player 2 has gotten very good at walking past my desk, seeing 14 tabs open, and just quietly going, researching another episode? Yes. Yes, I am. So if you enjoy these little adventures, then do me a favor. Make sure you follow the show wherever you're listening. Subscribe on YouTube, leave a rating or review if your app allows it. Because trust me when I say it genuinely helps more people stumble into this wonderfully nerdy little corner of the internet that we're trying to build. Okay, can I tell you where this episode went completely off the rails for me? I thought I was making an episode about why Batman is much cooler than Superman. That was the plan. That was literally the entire plan. But then I started taking notes, and somewhere around page 4, I wrote this sentence. Maybe anti-heroes aren't cooler. Maybe they're just easier to recognize. And listen, I just stared at that sentence for a minute because that's a different episode. That's not a comic book episode anymore. That's a people episode. And once that thought got in my head, I just couldn't let it go. Because stories don't become popular by accident. Characters don't become icons by accident. If millions of people all start falling in love with the same kinds of heroes, maybe they're telling us something. And not about Hollywood or comic books, but about ourselves. So, let's rewind the clock a little bit. Because there was a time when the hero didn't need a tragic backstory. It didn't need moral ambiguity, didn't need to be emotionally unavailable. They just needed to do the right thing. And somehow, that stopped being enough. So, this whole anti-hero thing, it's actually pretty new. I mean, relatively speaking. There was a time when no one wanted morally gray superheroes. No one. Can you imagine pitching that in like 1952? Okay, just hear me out. He's the hero, but he's got severe unresolved childhood trauma, trusts absolutely no one, sleeps maybe once every presidential administration, and processes every emotion through excessive violence. I think they'd probably just call the police on me. Back then, heroes were just heroes. They did the right thing because it was the right thing. They weren't trying to heal or to find themselves. They definitely weren't saying things like, maybe the real villain was society. No, the villain was over there. Go punch him. Movie over. Everyone go home. And honestly, as a kid, that made perfect sense to me. Just think about the heroes you grew up with. Whether it's Superman, Captain America, or Optimus Prime, or even the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, hell, even Indiana Jones. Did you ever stop and ask yourself, I wonder what unresolved emotional wounds are driving these characters? No! You were a kid! You were just like, hey, that dude punched a dinosaur. He's awesome. And that's childhood. Everything is simple. Good guys are good, bad guys are bad. Justice wins. And then your mom yells that dinner's ready. Life, my friends, is beautiful. But then you become an adult. And no one tells you adulthood is mostly just Googling things your parents somehow already knew. How long can chicken stay in the fridge? Can stress make your eye twitch? Why does my knee sound like microwave popcorn? When did this happen? But here's something I never really thought about until researching this episode. Those heroes weren't supposed to feel like us. That was not their job. Their job was to show us who we could be. That's why Superman smiles. That's why Captain America dives on the grenade. That's why Optimus keeps believing that freedom is the right of every being in the universe and worth fighting for. They weren't mirrors. They were goals. They were the person you hoped you'd become someday. And maybe that's why they felt so larger than life, because they weren't carrying the same baggage that we were. Or at the very least, they weren't wearing it on their sleeve. But then there was Batman. Now, hold on, Batman is still a hero. Please do not start writing angry emails at me. I know, just relax for a minute. But even as a kid, Batman just felt different. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't giving inspirational speeches. The man permanently looked like someone had interrupted his Saturday afternoon. He just always seemed tired. Have you ever noticed that? Batman constantly looks like someone who got woken up from the best nap of his life. And I loved him. And I didn't know why. I couldn't have explained it. I just knew that Batman was cool as shit. He was mysterious. He had gadgets, a Batmobile, a cave, which, by the way, how did none of Gotham's contractors ever figure that out? You mean to tell me no one poured concrete down there and went, huh, that's a surprisingly large underground facility? Come on, someone absolutely knew. But looking back, I think Batman was the first time a lot of us saw a hero who wasn't trying to pretend everything was okay. He was carrying grief, anger issues, loss. He had scars, physical and emotional ones. And for the first time, the hero didn't feel untouchable. He felt human. Now, I don't think any of us realized it at the time. I know I sure didn't, but looking back, I think Batman was the bridge. He was the hero standing with one foot in the old world, where heroes inspired us, and one foot in the new world, where heroes understood us. So Batman's over here looking like he hasn't had a decent night's sleep since Nixon was in office, and meanwhile, the real world is changing. Now, I'm going to simplify about 30 years of history into about 5 to 10 minutes. So if you're a history professor, just please give me some grace here. I am doing my best. Because here's what I kept bumping into while researching this episode. For a long time, people generally believed the grown-ups had things under control. Not perfectly and not all the time, but there was this underlying feeling that someone's driving the bus. Then, well, the bus hit a few telephone poles. The Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, political assassinations, economic recession, civil unrest. Suddenly, the people who were supposed to know what they were doing didn't. And I started wondering, if the real world suddenly feels a whole lot messier, then wouldn't our heroes start looking messier too? Because just think about it. If you're writing stories, then you're writing about the world that you live in, whether you mean to or not. Stories are kind of like photographs. Sometimes they capture exactly what's happening, and sometimes they capture what we wish was happening. But either way, they are telling you something about the people who made them. And somewhere around the 70s, the picture changed. Heroes started bleeding more, losing more, questioning themselves. Sometimes they won, and it still didn't feel like a victory, which honestly feels a lot like adulthood. Tell me, have you ever accomplished something that you've worked toward for months, and you finally get there, and immediately your brain goes, cool, what's next? Dude, can we enjoy something for like, I don't know, 5 minutes? And I think that's why characters like Wolverine exploded. Now, on paper, Wolverine is kind of ridiculous. I'm just going to say it. He's an immortal Canadian with metal claws who's approximately 600 years old. Okay, I'm exaggerating. Comic book timelines are weird, but you know what I mean. But here's why he works. It isn't because he has claws or the adamantium skeleton. It's because he's tired. He's seen too much. He's lost too many people that he cares about. He's been used, manipulated, experimented on. He keeps trying to push people away, and somehow he still ends up protecting people. That, my friends, is not a superhero. That's every dad who says, I don't need any help, while carrying 14 grocery bags in one trip because he's just too damn stubborn to make it into 2 trips. And then you've got Indiana Jones, and can I just say, Indiana Jones may be the most relatable action hero ever created, because unlike Superman, Indy is making this shit up as he goes. Half of his plans fail. He gets punched constantly. He's terrified of snakes. He's always sweaty, dirty, sometimes he's wrong, and somehow he keeps getting back up. And honestly, Indiana Jones fights the way I assemble IKEA furniture. Pure panic, held together by optimism and eventually dumb luck. And then something hit me. Maybe our definition of strength changed. You see, when you're a kid, strength is never falling down. But when you're an adult, strength is getting up just one more time than life knocks you down. And that's a completely different kind of hero. And the industry noticed. Oh boy, did the industry notice, because the industry looked at audiences saying, hey, we kind of like these flawed heroes, and did exactly what the comic book industry always does. It took a thoughtful idea, ran it through 3 focus groups, added explosions, and said, what if they're even more traumatized? Marvel started handing out childhood trauma like Oprah hands out cars. You get emotional baggage. You get emotional baggage. Everyone needs therapy. But here's where this rabbit hole took a turn that I wasn't expecting. Because there's a really big difference between a hero who's flawed and a hero who's not really a hero anymore. And once storytellers figured that out, well, things got a little weird. And this is where I completely changed my mind. Seriously, I went into this episode thinking people like anti heroes because they're just cooler. That's it. Case closed. Hit the credits. But it turns out I was way off because the more I sat with it, the more I realized something. I don't think we love anti-heroes because they're dangerous. I think we love them because they're hurting. And those are two very different things. Just think about your favorite anti-hero. Seriously, whoever just popped into your head, whether it's Batman, Wolverine, John Wick, Kratos, Arthur Morgan, Joel, Deadpool, whoever it is. Ask yourself this. What do you remember first? Their powers, if they have powers, or what happened to them? Exactly. Batman lost his parents. John Wick lost his wife and a puppy. Kratos lost his family. Arthur Morgan lost, well, Arthur lost pretty much everything. And Wolverine has lived long enough to lose almost everyone that he's ever come into contact with. None of these stories actually start with violence. They start with grief. And that's interesting. And then I started thinking about real life because, let's be honest, most adults aren't walking around carrying superpowers. We're carrying stress, bills, old regrets, that one embarrassing thing we said in 2006 that still keeps us up at night. And don't act like I'm the only one. You ever be drifting off to sleep and your brain just goes, "Hey, you remember 7th grade? No, dude, leave me alone. I have to go to work tomorrow." I wonder, and I'm genuinely asking here, I wonder if anti-heroes became more relatable as we get older, because eventually, everyone's carrying something. You see, when you're a kid, you think adults have it all figured out. Then you become an adult and realize we're all basically just pretending we know what we're doing. Some of us are just better at acting confident. My friends, half the time I walk into a Walmart and immediately forget why I came. I'm just standing in aisle 17 looking around like, I feel like I needed to grab something from here. But then television came along, and television said, what if we made the main character just not a good person? And my friends, what a sentence. For instance, take Walter White. Now, I know some of y'all were waiting for me to bring him up. But here's what's fascinating. When Breaking Bad starts, almost everyone's on Walter's side. He's underpaid, he's sick, he's scared. You want him to win. But then he lies, manipulates, kills, destroys his family, builds a meth empire, and somehow there were still people online saying, yeah, but Skyler's kind of annoying. Guys, are we hearing ourselves? Like, Walter is literally standing in front of us becoming the villain, and we're still trying to justify it. Why? And I don't think it's because we approve of what he does. I think it's because we understand that temptation. We understand pride. We understand wanting to matter, wanting control, wanting respect. And suddenly, Walter isn't just a drug kingpin. He's every little voice inside of us that whispers, just this once. No one will know. You deserve this. And that's terrifying because that's not a villain problem. That's a people problem. Arthur Morgan absolutely broke me. If you've played Red Dead Redemption 2, then you already know. Don't worry, no spoilers. But Arthur spends the second half of that game asking one question. Is it too late? And that's not a cowboy question. That's a human question. Is it too late to apologize? Too late to change? Too late to become someone your younger self would have been proud of? And that one sticks with you. And then there's John Wick. Now, everyone jokes about the dog. He killed all of those people over a puppy. No, he didn't. He killed all of those people because someone took away the last piece of hope his wife left him. The puppy wasn't the point. The puppy represented the possibility that maybe, one day, life would feel okay again, and someone destroyed it. Now, would I have handled that differently? Eh, maybe. Probably. But I understand why he was broken. There is a difference. And I think maybe that's the line we've been dancing around this entire episode. Understanding someone is not the same thing as agreeing with them. Empathy is not endorsement. You can look at Batman and understand his grief without thinking beating people unconscious every single night is a healthy coping mechanism. You can understand Walter White's fear without rooting for Heisenberg. You can understand John Wick's loss without thinking revenge automatically fixes grief. Guys, therapy does exist. There it is. I have been waiting to say that all episode. You're welcome, Ian. Because here's what I realized. The best anti-heroes aren't saying, be like me. They're saying, be careful. They're warning labels. They're cautionary tales. They're asking, how much of yourself can you lose before you stop recognizing who's looking back at you in the mirror? And that's not a comic book question or a movie question. That's a question every single one of us has to answer eventually, which actually makes what happened next even stranger because somehow the internet looked at all of these cautionary tales and turned them into motivational posters. And listen, we got to talk about that. We've spent this entire episode talking about anti-heroes, why we understand them, why we connect with them, why they feel so human. And honestly, I don't think any of that's a bad thing. Stories are supposed to make us feel something. They're supposed to make us ask questions. They're supposed to help us process things that are hard to process. That's why we tell stories. But somewhere along the way, I think we accidentally started confusing understanding someone with wanting to become them. And those are not the same thing. For instance, take Patrick Bateman. Now, before I say anything, if you've got a skincare routine, good for you. Please moisturize, wear sunscreen, and drink plenty of water. I am not attacking your face. I'm attacking the fact that somehow, somewhere, people watched American Psycho, a movie about a completely hollow, deeply disturbed man who's obsessed with money, appearances, status, and consumerism, and came away thinking, man, that morning routine is goals. Did we watch the same movie? The man is having a complete psychological collapse. The moisturizer is not the lesson. Run! Same thing with Tyler Durden, and I absolutely love Fight Club. Fantastic movie, but every few months the internet rediscovers it. And suddenly everyone starts posting quotes over black and white pictures of shirtless dudes. Guys, the movie is literally criticizing the exact thing that you're doing. It's like watching Jaws and deciding sharks seem pretty chill. And then the Joker, and whoo, buddy, the Joker. Can I ask you all an honest question? Has anyone ever actually, I don't know, listened to Alfred? No! Because no one wants to be Alfred, the emotionally mature grandfather figure who makes tea, gives excellent advice, and loves Bruce unconditionally. Nah, too emotionally available. Give me the billionaire who hasn't slept since the Reagan administration. Guys, we don't need another Batman. We need about 8 million more Alfred Pennyworths. And look, I'm not pretending I'm above this. I am a nerd. I have done this. You have probably done this. We all have. We've all looked at a fictional character and gone, man, I kind of get that guy. That's normal. That's empathy. The problem starts when we move from I understand them to I want to be them. Because let's just be real for a second. Batman does not heal. Not really. Frank Castle doesn't heal. Walter White doesn't heal. Patrick Bateman definitely doesn't heal. And Tyler Durden is literally the opposite of healing. These stories don't end with healthy coping mechanisms. They end with consequences. And that's the point. But social media doesn't really like consequences, does it? It likes aesthetics. It likes vibes. It likes 30-second clips with dramatic music. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Black and white edits, slow motion, rain, funk music. Probably Ryan Gosling looking sad for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the caption someone put on it. Ryan Gosling has accidentally become the mascot for every emotionally confused meme on the internet. And I don't even think Ryan Gosling knows what's happening anymore. And maybe that's because vibes are easier than context. A 30-second clip can make anyone look cool. You could probably make Eeyore look like the hardest dude alive with the right soundtrack. Pooh, thanks for noticing me. I mean, come on, just tell me I'm wrong. At any rate, here's what I keep coming back to. I don't think people are actually looking for violence or for revenge or looking for power. I think they're just looking for permission to admit that they're tired, they're angry, they're hurting. And anti-heroes give them that. And that's why they matter. That's why these stories endure, not because they tell us to stay broken, but because they look at broken people and say, I see you. The problem is, that's only supposed to be chapter 1, not the entire book. Because if all you ever do is identify with the pain, and you never move toward healing, then you're not following the story anymore. You're getting stuck in the first act. And no one wants to live in Act 1 forever. But that got me thinking. Maybe the reason people seem to be rediscovering characters like Superman lately is because after years of being told the world is fundamentally broken, we're all kind of ready to hear someone say, yeah, I know. So let's be better anyway. Because I think that might actually be the real superpower we've been missing. And when I started writing this episode, I thought I was going to spend 30 minutes or so convincing you that Batman was cooler than Superman. And now here we are, talking about grief, healing, hope, and Ryan Gosling somehow catching strays. You know what? I don't know how we got there either. But I'm kind of glad we did. Because here's what I think I've landed on. I don't think we stopped loving heroes. I think we just needed someone who understood us first. Just think about it. When you're hurting, when you're angry, when life has knocked you around just a little bit. Sometimes Superman feels too far away, too perfect, too put together. But Batman looks like he's had bad days. A hell of a lot of them. He knows what loss feels like. He knows what anger feels like. He knows what it feels like to wake up every morning and choose to keep going anyway. And there's comfort in that. But here's where I think I was wrong. I don't think Batman was ever supposed to be the destination. I think he was supposed to be the bridge. Because if you stay there forever, if anger becomes your identity, if cynicism becomes your entire personality, if every room you walk into is yet another battle, that's exhausting. Can I tell you something that I've noticed? The older I get, the less impressed I am by characters who never smile. When I was 16, oh man, he is such a badass. But nowadays, buddy, do you have hobbies? You ever go fishing? You go out grilling on the weekends? Have you even called your mom lately? I'm serious. At some point, you realize emotional stability is actually kind of cool. Hell, who knew? And maybe that's why Superman has started making a comeback. Not because he's stronger or because he's cooler, but because hope feels kind of rebellious nowadays, right? Just think about the world we live in. Everyone's angry all the time. Everyone's picking a side. Everyone's algorithm is screaming at them 24 hours a day. Outrage gets clicks. Cynicism gets engagement. But hope? Hope doesn't trend very often, and maybe that's exactly why we need it. Superman's greatest superpower was never the flying, or the heat vision, or lifting buildings off the ground. It was walking into a broken world, looking at people at their absolute worst, and saying, I still believe you can be better. And that takes guts, real guts, because it's easy to believe in people when they're at their best. But it's a whole hell of a lot harder when they're not. And maybe that's the lesson anti-heroes were trying to teach us all along. Not that darkness wins, or that revenge heals, or that anger makes us stronger, but that broken people can still choose. Arthur Morgan chose, Kratos chose, Logan chose, hell, even Batman, at his best, chooses. Every single night, he chooses not to become the thing that hurt him. And that's what makes him a real hero. Not the cape or the gadgets, but the choice. So, why do we love anti-heroes? Because they remind us it's okay to not be okay. They tell us that grief doesn't make us weak, that failure does not make us worthless, that carrying scars doesn't mean carrying shame. Sometimes you just need someone to look at you and say, yeah, this is hard. And that's enough to help you take just one more step. But eventually, you have to take the next one. Eventually, understanding your pain just isn't enough. You have to decide what you're going to build with it. Because pain can become compassion or bitterness. Loss can become wisdom or vengeance. Grief can become love or isolation. The story does not choose that. We do. And maybe that's why we've needed both all along. We need Batman to remind us we're not alone in the dark. And we need Superman to remind us there is a dawn. Hell, I don't know. Maybe that's cheesy. But then again, maybe we've spent so much time making fun of hope that we forgot it was one of the bravest things a person could have. Anyways, therapy does exist. And that's going to do it for this week's rabbit hole. I would genuinely love to hear your answer to this one. Who's your favorite anti-hero? And not because they're the coolest, but because they made you feel understood. Come tell me over in the lobby, our Average Joe Nerdcast community, or shoot me an email at averagejoenerdcast@gmail.com, or leave a comment wherever you're watching or listening. These conversations are honestly my favorite part of doing this show. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow the show. Subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if your podcast app lets you leave a rating or review, please do. Trust me when I say it really does help more people discover this show. And a huge shout out, as always, to my amazing Player 2. Thank you for believing in every crazy rabbit hole, every late night research binge, and every, hey, I have an episode idea that somehow turns into 20 some odd open browser tabs and a 2-hour conversation. And to each and every one of you, thank you. Seriously. You could spend your time anywhere. The fact that you choose to spend part of your week hanging out with me, believe me when I say I don't take that for granted. So, I've been Nate. Remember, stay gold, nerd bold. And I'll catch you on the next one.
Game over.